हाँ कर दो.
Start now. Go live. So go live. Go live. Start. Okay.
So hello everybody, good morning and welcome back to the EduForce, this the Hindu analysis lecture series. So let us start with this our analysis for the day, that is 2nd of June 2023. So today we will be seeing the first page of the main front page of the Hindu. So on Hindu first page, let us see what is there important for us. So of course there are certain things from here we need to take into account. So first is judicial panel to prove Manipur violence. Fine. So we just need to be aware of, because this is a news we are we are tapping on from the last you can say a month almost. Fine. So no need to go into again the same thing here. Just keep in mind that now a judicial panel will be proving all the issues related to the violence that took place in the states of Manipur. Fine. So, and this would be led by the High Court Chief Justice, a retired High Court Chief Justice. Fine. Remember this. The most important thing that from here on you can remember is the name of the Chief Justice who is going to head the panel. Nothing more than that. Fine. So India Nepal impacts on energy and transport. This is important. This is the first topic we would be this is one of the topics we would be discussing today. Then shifting to this side, you see this side we will be focusing on one thing is sedition law should be retained. This 124A, which has been kept under suspension by the Supreme Court. Fine. Further moving, okay. So then we will be focusing on the India's China, this border meet you can say, or the border issues discussion which took place on the bilateral level after the 4 years, which is very, very important post Doklam, and the recent issues that is going on between the two countries. Fine. So but first of all, let us scroll through these the pages. Let us see which page is important and what's there on the next page, so that you will be getting the idea. If you are a beginner, you will be having an idea that what exactly to read, and that would come from the GS syllabus part. If you can remember that, recall that, then it would be very easy for you to comprehend that what exactly we need to read in the newspaper. But I will be showing in the initially, so that you will be better equipped with what to read and what to leave. That's more important. Fine. Okay, moving ahead, see nothing on this page, just the local news. We need not to focus that much. Yes, as an aware citizen, we need to be very much aware of what's happening around us, but need not to go much into detail. Fine. Moving ahead, shifting to the next pages. Of course, no, not that important from exam point of view particularly. Okay. Further, then, okay. Further, let us move to the next pages, editorial page. Okay, yes. So this is very, very important article written by Palpre Balakrishnan, an economist. Fine. And this is very, very important article that we will be starting our discussion with, and that is related to the India's manufacturing challenge, India's manufacturing sector's challenge. So yesterday only we discussed that one of the important things that farming sector, to say agriculture and services, registered net positive growth. Fine. The basis of the data released by NSO, but manufacturing is somewhere not doing that good, and you have seen that from the previous quarter of 11.7% growth, manufacturing sector registered just 1.3% of growth this year. In the last quarter of fiscal year or financial year 2023. Fine. So you see from 11.1% to 1.3%. So we'll see this is the context, you can say, the background of this whole story, what he is talking about. But in this piece of article, he has covered everything since new economic policy, or you can say the liberalization, privatization, globalization reforms of 1991. Fine. He has covered everything. He has even given the the insights that what actually missed out by the what, or looked after by the what, the LPG reforms of 1991, and where exactly we misstepped. Fine. So we will see each and everything, but for the beginning, for the context, I have already given you the the state of manufacturing sectors at present. So let us start with our discussion about the India's manufacturing challenges. Fine. That how sector is doing. If there are issues, then what are the structural issues? Basically, in this article, he talks about the structural issues which is crippling the growth of manufacturing sector. Fine. Or which has underchecked the growth of this manufacturing sector. So let us start with this. So he is saying one thing is clear from the yesterday's data, that the issue of manufacturing or services as a desirable path for India's economy makes the rounds in public fora periodically. So of course, yesterday we have discussed that, see, agriculture cannot make us developed country. That's practically speaking not possible. Fine. Any country today you see labeled as developed country, be it US, UK, all of them, even the major East Asian nations or the Asian tigers to which we say Taiwan, Japan, even China, Singapore. Fine. So all of them, if you see, has done remarkable, all of these countries have done remarkable, especially in the manufacturing sectors. Fine. And if you see their share in overall GDP, the share of manufacturing sector in overall GDP is much compared to India, it is too higher, But so there is the main problem he underlines, but the issue is about whether our growth story should be manufacturing led or the services led. Fine. We'll find out. I will be giving you the conclusion as well at the end of this article, that what should be the much realistic path for moving forward from here on. So let us see. He is since he mentioned two things, manufacturing and services, so he starts with services first, and he says that during the beginning of this century, fine, 21st century, India's economy, or especially the service sector, registered or seen boom in the India software sector. Fine. The services sector, especially one of the components, the services software sector, software and hardware. So India's software exports were, we are the major exporters of software. So software exports were booming in the beginning of this century. Fine. It means the century of India began on the path of service-led growth. Fine. Okay. It had been asked why India's services sector should not leapfrog over manufacturing to propel the economy forward. Okay, at that time, when something is going good, so we don't question. Fine. It seems like, yes, India's growth story will be different, and why can't India leapfrog, from agriculture to services? Okay, this is what he is talking about. But that's not the case here. Let us see. Let us delve more in the details. So this proposal challenged the standard model of economic development. Now he says that when we talked during that time about this services-led growth or India software boom, so this was against the standard model of economic growth, which says that any country to become developed, this standard model of economic growth I am talking about, or development, about developmental economics. So of course, it talks about that any country to grow consistently or to become developed nation, it has to have its manufacturing base. I mean, at the center of its growth should be the manufacturing sector. So the growth would be anyway led by the manufacturing sector, and that would only be consistent, because manufacturing is something which is going to provide you consistent employment, sustainable employment rather, you can say, as well as adding to the sustainable growth process. fine, both creating output as well as providing you employment as well. So this is what he says, that this notion of service led growth has been, you know, against the standard model of economic development. I have already explained you what is the model of standard, you know, standard model of economic development, fine, that is growth should be manufacturing led, fine, center of the growth story should be manufacturing sector. Okay, moving forward. So in most successful economies, he gave the example of industrial expansion had come first, because the standard economic model stresses on manufacturing sector. So in most of the countries, be it UK, you see industrial revolution, be it UK, so be it USA, Singapore, even the East Asian tigers like Japan, Taiwan, Singapore and all, even China. So of course, everywhere you see that the boom or the growth has been led by the manufacturing sector. Fine, this is what he says. Okay, so further, now taking the context of economic reforms of 1991, so he says that reforms of 1991 had almost exclusively focused on manufacturing, but the significant scaling down of the tariffs and the dismantling of the license permit Raj, we call it, you know, license permit Raj or license quota. So license permit Raj was later on converted to LPG through the reforms of 1991, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization. Fine, license permit Raj or license permit quota, even we say this. So license permit quota was translated into liberalization, privatization and globalization through the economic reforms of 1991. Fine. Okay, moving ahead. So India's manufacturing sector ought not to be seen only in terms of size. He says we should not just see this in terms of size. There has been a qualitative change after 1991. So he is saying that we have seen or experienced some qualitative changes as well post 1991, and there we need to actually focus. The range and quality of products manufactured in India. Now there are two things, range and the quality of products manufactured in India have undergone an impressive increase. So this is the qualitative change basically he is underlining, that is the range and the quality of products that we are manufacturing post reforms 1991. Okay, fine. So the rising quality and variety of the goods, produced without the expansion of manufacturing in relation to the economy suggests a rising inequality. Now here is again an important point he is giving, and that is this rising variety of goods produced and rising quality and variety of goods produced without expansion of manufacturing sector, he says, is again aiding to the rising inequality, because we have our per capita income, one of the lowest per capita incomes in the world. Majority of this middle class, so-called middle class, so of course the richer section or the top, the creamy layer in India, somewhere holds around 70% of resources, hold by just 1%, the top 1%. So of course he says that the quality and variety of these goods is going to be demanded not by the masses, जो कि market है India में, we are the largest market, one of the say, in terms of population as well, so and economy, of course, for economic industry, opportunity. So we are one of the largest market for any, this you can say consumer goods. So of course, but he says that considering, taking into account the per capita level of our income, this demand is not going to be propelled by the masses of India, but to be restricted in the brackets of just 1 and 2%. And this 1-2%, people is not going to, somewhere propel the economic growth led by the manufacturing sector. Fine. Okay. Now unimpressive record. He talks about unimpressive record. In this, he underlines about the two major schemes of the current establishment, and these two major schemes he underlines unimpressive record. So he says that after economic reforms of 1991, the next time manufacturing came into the government's view was after 2014, talking about the current establishment, and he underlines two schemes, Make in India alongside the recent, the production linked incentive schemes. So two schemes of the current establishments he underlines, and through which he says that post 1991 reforms, we see the manufacturing sector is taking central stage, post 2014 now, through these sectors, means government tried to propel or encourage the private sector to come invest in and produce. But what is the result? So already he said unimpressive record. So what does it mean? It means the result is not positive ones, of course. Let us see. So he says that essentially, of course, production linked incentive scheme, other scheme, and first is I said Make in India. There are two schemes. So he said that though they were announced with much fanfare, but within few months of these announcements, government assuming office, the record of these schemes has not been impressive. So that's why unimpressive record. It says that these schemes, the impact that these schemes should have on the economy, especially in the manufacturing sector, is not that impressive. So that's why he says it's an unimpressive record of the current government. The first advanced estimates of the national income for 2022 and 23 that I underlined initially based on yesterday's discussion and data, that manufacturing growth registered just 1.3% for the year. First advanced estimates of the national income of financial year 2023, where NSO says that manufacturing growth is showing just 1.3% of the growth. Less than that for agricultural and all main segments of the services. This is what we have discussed yesterday. So this is again, he says that this data unambiguously point to the role of the demonetization of 2016 in the slowing of the manufacturing sector. So here he says that demonetization to a certain extent slowed down the manufacturing sector's growth. Fine, keep in mind this thing. Okay, further moving ahead, he says that this issue reportedly came up for discussion at a private event where it was agreed that economy needs a manufacturing push. Of course, so he is saying that time and again the current government, especially the Honorable Finance Minister, talks to the private, especially the private sectors, and she encourages private sectors to, invest. And he quotes one of the statement that I am sure the Indian private sector is ready. Are you? The statement, Honorable Finance Minister to the industry sector, especially the private sector, to come forward and invest. He says that the government focus since beginning is on, the private sector, giving incentives or aiding to the private sector so that they come forward and make investments, and for this purpose he gives few examples as well. For example, there are 2-3 examples from here that we can carry on. First is, he says that many publicly refer to the many policy initiatives favoring the corporate sector. Among them, the tax rate had been lowered substantially in 2019. I hope all of us are aware that used to be one of the highest tax rates in the, of course, the Asian market economy especially. But now it is very much competitive and it meets, somewhere in the range of average corporate tax rates of the OECD countries. Fine, today. So, and the government also claims to have improved the ease of doing business. Of course, you see now the discarded this, World Bank has discarded because of certain allegations against the ease of doing business ranking. So today you see that in the last ranking of this under ease of doing business released by World Bank, we were at rank 63rd. And we used to be in 140s during 2014-15. So in next 5-6 years, we we made a remarkable progress under this ranking. More than more than around 60-70% progress we registered. So of course, this was one thing that happened to be the positive for India. So ease of doing business. There is also another factor, namely public investment. Yes. So you see that now, even in the budget we discussed for these years, that government is somewhere coming forward and making huge investment, especially in the form of capex, that is capital expenditure, and it was raised by around 18.5% in this year's budget. So this is again a huge thing. I mean, these 2-3 things that we can carry on from here to and we can put the same in any subjective paper where we dealing with the economics thing, especially in GS3. So this topic can be covered under GS3, remember? Okay. I was raised by this unusually unusually he is saying, this word is very important, this unusually high increase should come to the aid of the private sector by raising aggregate demand. So he is saying that if government is making this much of capital expenditure, then we assume that, or this is, this can be understood that government is doing all this with the assumption that this will aid to the private sector investment by propelling the, household demands or the private demand. Yesterday on, I mentioned that, Indian economy is basically characterized by private, demand and public investment. Government takes the center stage. This has to change, in order to make our growth process sustainable. Fine. Now he is talking about the price of food. So before I go into this, one thing I would like to, make you understand or explain you from the economics angle. There is technical, some technicalities here. So there are two things. Remember, we have APC, average propensity to consume. Let us say marginal propensity to consume, not take APC, but marginal propensity to consume. Now what is MPC in economics? So it is simply change in C with respect to change in Y. Marginal propensity to consume is change in consumption over change in what? Income, with respect to change in income. So remember, MPC is marginal propensity to consume, means every additional, item you are adding to your consumption basket. Fine. That is marginal propensity to consume with respect to the every additional marginal increment in your income. So what is the ratio? Fine. Remember, MPC of poor people would be higher because, poor people are not even able to meet the basics necessities of life. So they would be, demanding more of the products as their income bracket would shift upward. Fine. Their income would be increasing. But the higher, high net worth individuals or the, the richest people of this country has, somewhere MPC lesser than the poor people because their basic necessities has already been fulfilled. So their demand for the products would be in the luxury category more of, and not that much in the basic necessities, because that's already been fulfilled, as I said. So remember, MPC of the poor is more than the MPC of the richer class. This is one thing. Now let us start with the price of food. So price of food, why I gave the this concept here, to discuss this concept, because this would be, relevant for this discussion, the price of food. So price of food, of course, would be, food की price की care कौन करता है? Of course, the poor class. Fine. जिसकी necessities meet नहीं हो रही, richer को करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Even they can make, of course, they deal with most luxuries and all. So of course, they need not to be that much worried about the prices of food behaving in the economy. So despite the favorable measures undertaken by the government, he is saying, it would be simplistic to assume or expect that the government, he says that despite many measures, it would be simplistic to expect that industry leaders to achieve a manufacturing push on their own. Why so? Because now he talks about two things, that is demand versus supply here in this paragraph. He focuses on the two things, demand versus supply, demand and supply. So he says that whatever measures government has undertaken till now, or the policy measures, the focus is on the supply side. Like for example, infrastructure boost karna, fine, production incentive. So again, means you are propelling the production side, supply side, not the demand side. This is the biggest issue he underlines, that the mismatch between the demand and supply has been one of the major issue which is, which has underchecked the growth of, or which has checked the growth of, you can say, the private investment in the economy. Because if demand is not coming up, so any rational private, investor won't be setting up the industry, won't be producing more. Fine. So this is one of the biggest reason he underlies about the demand. See, he says that household demand for manufacturers inevitably follows the satisfaction of this demand for the necessities of life. For example, food, housing, health and education, none of which can be postponed. For a substantial section of India's households, food occupies a large share. This constricts the growth of demand for manufacturers. Fine. So he's saying the substantial portion of India's population demand revolves around the demand for food products, basic necessities, food, clothes, shelter. Fine, and not towards the luxury goods, or you can say the manufactured items to a greater extent. So this is one of the reasons that why our manufacturing sector is not performing that well. Fine. Further, the relationship between per capita income and the share of food in household expenditure. So now he underlines the relationship between per capita income and the share of food in household expenditure. Strongly negative globally means more the per capita income, less would be the demand for, or the less would be the share of food in household expenditure globally or in a developed country particularly. But this we don't see in the with respect to our country, that is India. So with the richest countries such as the United States and Singapore having low such shares, means richest countries having more of higher per capita income has lower share of food in total expenditure, overall households expenditure, but that's not the case in India. So of the larger economies of the world like us, the share of food is the largest in India. Now again, this is one of the important factor or the reason which is which has underchecked the growth of industry sector, especially the manufacturing sector. Fine, because a higher share of the income is to be borne by the food, not by the manufactured goods or the demand for manufactured goods. And its GDP per capita the lowest. See, this is the reverse. Largest share of expenditure in India, household expenditure is the share is food of the food, but on the other side we have the lowest per capita as well. Fine. So this is applied. Actually, the paradox is industry leaders have no control over the demand side. He is saying, of course, this is very true, that industry leaders cannot control, has no control over the demand side. So of the equation, बिल्कुल ठीक बात है. As an investor, as a producer, you can produce. You cannot, keep tap on the demand side. You cannot boost the demand of the general masses. This can be only boosted by the government or through the certain schemes and initiatives or subsidies. However, the possibility of exporting means that the manufacturing sector of the economy can sidestep a narrow domestic market. Now, from here on, he changes the track. Till this paragraph, he talks about the household sector, he talks about the domestic economy. Now, he changes the track and he is shifting towards this export sector. He says that one thing to propel your domestic manufacturing is domestic demand. The other thing, the other way of this story, how you can propel the manufacturing sector is by exporting. If the domestic demand is tepid, rather say, is on the lower side, then how we can boost our manufacturing sector is by exporting more and more, by boosting the exports demand for the industrial products or the manufacturing goods. Fine. This is another angle to the story which is very, very important. And here he gives the example of East Asian countries, the smaller countries of the East Asia like Taiwan, Japan, fine, even Singapore, and these are the countries done remarkable, especially in the field of exports. Today they are the leaders. Smaller countries of East Asia, or we call them Asian tigers as well, would never have been able to grow their manufacturing base to such an impressive level had they relied on their domestic markets alone. So this is very, very important point. So what he says, that in order to make India's manufacturing, boost the manufacturing sector of India, it's very, very, it is imperative to focus on boosting our exports of the manufactured goods. We cannot do it alone or one-sidedly by focusing just on domestic demand. Domestic demand can never make it a sustainable growth, sustainable growth of the manufacturing sector. So taking this route, however, does require that an economy's manufacturers are globally competitive. Of course, our products जो हमारे हैं, that will be globally demanded only if our products are competitive. Simple सी बात है, be it price competitive or in terms of quality. So of course he says that even this route for India, that is boosting export demand for manufactured goods, domestic manufactured goods which has been produced, is not that easy because our products need to be globally competitive. This is a precondition. Fine. Further, in comparison with the economies of East Asia, he says that there are certain necessities or necessary conditions that must be fulfilled in order to boost our exports of manufacturing goods. And what are those factors? So he says that one of the factors is infrastructure and the other is the skill level of the workforce. On both the fronts we are lacking, but somewhere government is focusing more on infrastructure sector. Even we have Pradhan Mantri this skill yojana as well. Fine, we are running skills centers as well. We are focused on this boost improving the skills of workforce as well. So we are, of course, we have started on this path. We are thinking, and of course we are even taking the steps moving on this path, but it will take time, because this has important role in determining the cost of production and the type of products that a country can produce, because these two things add to the this mechanism of global competitiveness. Because cost of production agar kam hogi, then only your products could be competitive globally. Fine. So this is why he is linking this thing with global competitiveness. So type of products that we produce and the cost of production, these two things are very, very important to make our exports globally competitive. Further, the export of manufacturing is largely by sea. Now he again focusing on infrastructure here, and in this whole paragraph he focuses on the ports and sea transport. So he says India mein jo hai, the competitive disadvantage faced by India's exporters can be seen in much higher turnaround time. Now what is turnaround time? So my friends, turnaround time is the total process, let us say, involved in shipping a product, means exporting a product, and the product is reaching to the final destination. So all the process which has been involved from shipping of the product to the reaching of the product to the final destination. Let us say India is sending something to the Singapore. So यहाँ से sending process जब start हुआ product भेजना, तब से लेकर के सिंगापुर के final market में जब तक product पहुँच रहा है, how much time we are basically taking. Fine. So we have one of the higher turnaround time as well in the world. So this is again one of the negative things, or one of the factor which is undertaking the growth of India's exports, even export sector. Fine. He gives the example of, let us say, India's ports connected to the Singapore. So of course turnaround time is too much, more than what actually countries like Singapore takes. The importance of ports for exports may be seen. He gives the example of Kerala traders, that they are forced to use ports outside the state as they cost much less to use. This is one of the examples you can quote, that Kerala's traders use ports outside the Kerala because of the lower cost than using the ports of Kerala itself. Now educational outcomes. The another factor he underlines, which is undertaking the growth of India's manufacturing sector, is the skills, the education. So he says that even in terms of education, what we are providing to our masses is not the skills education especially, and not the education which is demanded by the industrial sector. Fine. And it gives the example that even the industry leader says that there is mismatch between what the graduates comes with and what we are actually demanding or what we needed in terms of skills. So of course he gives two examples to substantiate his point, and these two examples are an international this ranking under PISA. There is a PISA test, program for international students assessment, which assessment reveals this directly. In a group of about 75 countries, the country of East Asia are at the very top, while India barely manages not to be the last. Okay? So in group of 75 countries in PISA assessment, program for international students assessment, we barely figure amongst the last position. Fine. Now further he says that even if you discard this international assessment, let us focus on the domestic assessment undertaken by the, let us say, non-governmental organization Pratham. So even this Pratham survey underlines that we have very low reading ability and numeracy of Indian children in their early years, especially the school children. So what the foundation we are laying, basic foundation of India is not as strong. If our school children are not equipped with the numeracy and basic, reading, this ability, then of course we are nowhere producing the, capable, workforce which can add to our manufacturing sector's growth. Fine. So further, he says that there is no standardized test for the university graduates. These are just a survey related to the school children, but not university. But even that, in case of India's university, the case is not that different. India's university, he says, is expanded to serve the aspiration of middle class who wish to avoid manual work. However, for those who headed for life as a skilled worker, ranging from carpenter to plumbers and mechanics, university is not an aspiration at all. Okay, this cohort has been neglected in economic policy making. Of course, if we just keep on producing the plumbers, carpenters and mechanics, they are not going to add much to our manufacturing sector's growth. Fine. So when he give the example that when Planning Commission existed, had released a data showing that only about 5% of India's youth have had any kind of technical training compared to the South Korea, जिसके youth की technical training was around 85%. We were at 5%, means our youth's technical training was somewhere around 5%, and South Korea was having the same technical training of their youths in the range of 85%. So you can compare the two figures, 5% versus 85%. So that's how we are lacking. The economic reforms, he says, of 1991 are undertaken with a view to raising the presence of manufacturing. To this effect, the trade and industrial policy regime had been overhauled. However, it overlooked the need for an entire ecosystem, including schooling, training, and infrastructure for manufacturing to flourish. So he is underlining that basic focus of the new economic policy or economic reforms of 1991 was focused on raising the presence of manufacturing sector, but neglected the qualitative aspect, like let us say skills, training, to a certain extent even the infrastructure as well. So these were the points which are hampering or undertaking our growth of manufacturing sector. This is what he says. And it cannot be achieved merely through the legislation. Liberalizing reforms have run their course in India. He is saying now the reforms have run their course, and now we need to shift to some structural points. Of course, the structural reforms we need, especially in the qualitative sector. Qualitative aspect he is focusing, like skilling, the workforce. Of course, the infrastructure government has taken good steps in this direction. So this is what the entire piece of article, a very, very good read for the today. Fine, you should not miss it out, and this is very good insight which you can take up, or the factors you can consider which is undertaking the growth of India's industry or manufacturing sector. Fine, do not miss on it. Okay, moving ahead. Okay, moving to the next pages. Next is India's Nepal. Yesterday we took up this topic, India's Nepal bilateral meetings. Nepali Prime Minister is in India. So here India, Nepal signed pacts on energy and transport. So India to import 10,000 megawatt of electricity from Nepal. Fine. And our Prime Minister highlighted the close cultural link between the two countries, and he further calls for fast tracking the projects related to the Ramayana circuit, which is connecting what? Ayodhya, let us say, or Mithila from yes, of course, Nepal. So this is a project which is undertaken, which is going to connect India with Nepal, named Ramayana circuit. Fine. So there are certain issues here. Here the energy focus is on and transport. They are focused on hydroelectricity energy. At the same time, the focus is on hydrogen as well. Nepal's hydropower, not hydrogen, hydropower to Bangladesh through Indian territory. Fine. This can be rerouted through the India's territory. Fine. So the major issues, this is something which we should not miss on. So MUs and all, but just majorly focuses on that what exactly. So the major pacts had been signed in two sectors, let us say energy and transport. Keep in mind this thing. The latest India's Nepal relations, which we study under GS2, India and neighboring relations. Fine. Okay. Further, moving ahead. Okay, this is important. I was mentioning initially, India and China hold talks on LAC issues in New Delhi. After 4 years, they hold such, this bilateral talks. So readouts from both sides suggested that no major headway in the slow-moving negotiations. Negotiations post Doklam and all. I hope we are aware of this thing. Fine. Disengagement along the LAC line of actual control. Chinese instrument said that the 19th military level talks will be held soon. So this was, India-China hold talks, bilateral talks on the border issues, and further 19th round of military level talks will be held soon. Means 18th round of military talks we have held, till now hold, and with no major substantial outcomes. But yes, it is progressing slowly but steadily. Fine. Apart from this, let us move to the next pages. What we can have? Yes. So this is important. Sedition law can be retained, but with safeguards. Law Commission. This is very, very important as far as your GS2 governance is concerned. So it said that sedition, being a colonial legacy, is not a valid ground for law repeal. He's saying reports of Law Commission chaired by Justice Rituraj Avasthi, retired, is the chairman of this Law Commission currently. So he says that this commission says that labeling that this is a colonial legacy cannot be the ground for repealing this. Fine. But in view of the misuse of section 124A of the IPC, panel has recommended that the center issue model guidelines to curb its wrong application by the enforcement agency. So this is very, very important. The sedition law can be retained, but with certain inbuilt safeguards. Fine. And colonial legacy cannot be ground for discarding or repealing this act. That is Sedition Act or Sedition Law. Fine. He said that merely ascribing the term colonial to a law or institution does not by itself ascribe to it an idea of anachronism. Fine. Anachronism. So he says that we can continue with it provided we have certain built-in safeguards. Fine. Moving further. Okay. Next pages. Okay, this is again important. Half of electricity to be from renewable sources by 2027. Again, important thing for us. Fine. So by 2030, an estimate of the country's projected power needs by the Central Electricity Authority, Wednesday suggested that this target may be achieved earlier by 2026-27. So what, of course, we are doing very good in this term, especially renewable energy and all, meeting our fossil fuel targets. We are achieving our targets in advance, just 7-8 years before the the actual deadline. And here too, we are going to meet it somewhere by 2026-27. The target is of 2030. So very good. Of course, you are performing good. From here on, you can carry on the data, a few data, from here. Let us, for example, it will increase the share of non-fossil fuel based capacity is likely to increase to 57.5% by the end of 2026-27. This is important data. Fine. It's more than 50%, you can see 57.5%, and may likely to further increase to 68% by the end of 2031-32 from around 42.5% as on April. So this is very much relevant data, and the current one that in April 2023 we stand at 42.5%, but by 2026-27 will be somewhere moving in the range of 57%. This is will be very huge achievement for us. Fine. So this is important data or figures as far as exam is concerned. Fine. Okay. Moving to the next pages. Okay, yes. So what we have discussed in the article, editorial discussion related to manufacturing. So here May's manufacturing, जो मई की manufacturing PMI है, that scales 31 months high, almost 3 years. S&P Global Survey. So overall business confidence levels about growth prospects continue to improve, hitting a 5-month high Output levels were the highest in 28 months, and pressure capacity compelled firms to accelerate. So this is what we are talking about. The PMI surged to a 31-month high of 58.7%. Anything 50 plus is a positive side, positive one. So this is a very good, and this is lending credence to what the government has, the government policies or the initiative undertaken by the current establishment, that yes, we are heading in a positive direction, but need to improve. We are lacking. So the future seems to be bright, provided we improve wherever we are lacking. So this is again a very good data for us. Manufacturing momentum, you can see 31-month high jump of 58.7% in May, as factory orders rose at the fastest clip since January 2021. So of course this is a very good thing for us, a good augury for us. Okay. Okay. Okay, these are miscellaneous facts, figures, news. Okay, sports, and finally I think we are moving to, of course, the last pages. Okay, so here we'll be stopping for the day. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for tomorrow's Hindu analysis. Do go through whatever we've discussed. So thank you so much. Take care.